Every year, there are countless videos promising that this is the best time in history to start creating on YouTube. But while each provides a unique take on that same idea, in one way or another, they're all just trying to convince you why you'll absolutely succeed if you just start this year. And sure, maybe they're right, many of you will. But what if I told you the real value isn't in that promised success at all? That you can still win at YouTube even if your videos and channel fail. Now, I do believe that this year is the perfect time to start your channel. I've seen the same videos as you that appeal to both our ambition and our emotions. That content is a great investment in the future, that you can earn money on the side, that you can meet people who care about the same stuff as you, that it's a creative outlet, that it gives you an excuse to work on the thing that you're passionate about. Those are all true, but I have a feeling many of you watching this video are still searching for a different reason that will convince you to accept the risk, that will silence all of the what ifs, and that will finally push you to take the leap. And after 20 years working as a creative, all the way back as a self-taught freelance designer at 15 years old, to now leading projects with millions of dollars on the line as a creative director today, I've learned a lot about success and failure at every scale, but unlike all the other videos on this topic, I don't want to talk about all of the success and what that looks like. I want to focus on the failures, because it's not that we can't recognize the benefits if we succeed on YouTube. We can all see the upside of that outcome. What's been missing from the conversation is what no one talks about, which is the incredible amount of value that you can still tap into no matter how your videos or your channel perform. Which is why in this video, I want to introduce you to 3 reasons why starting your YouTube and your creator business this year is an excellent idea, especially if it fails. Now, I know this sounds a bit counterintuitive, so let's kick off the first reason with a familiar idea from Steve Jobs. We all know him for his incredible successes, and entrepreneurs and creatives love dissecting his path to find the formula. But one of his most powerful insights wasn't about success. It was about uncertainty, and I think it can best be summed up by a quote from his 2005 Stanford University commencement speech, where he said that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference. The example that he follows this with from his own life was when he dropped out of college just after 1 semester due to financial reasons. He felt that the required courses weren't valuable enough to justify his parents' life savings, but instead of leaving education entirely, he stuck around on campus and he began to audit courses that just interested him, specifically calligraphy classes. And it was in those courses that he learned about typefaces and letter spacing and what makes typography beautiful. And he admits that he had no practical use for this at the time, but 10 years later, that specific knowledge helped Apple revolutionize personal computing when Macintosh became the very first computer with beautiful typography, and it's something that we now take for granted on nearly every device. I always personally liked and found comfort in this idea that random or unrelated experiences can end up being crucial to future success and opportunities, and that you can only see the connections in retrospect. But truthfully, it wasn't until just a few weeks ago when I was listening to a podcast with a co-founder of HubSpot that I finally realized how to make this idea less of a comforting truth reminding me to trust the process, and more of an actionable insight that I could make use of proactively. And what Dharmesh said in that podcast was that as entrepreneurs, we have to think of ourselves as dot collectors, and that collecting dots could be anything from the skills that you learn to the experiences that you gain or the people that you meet. And it's a very subtle shift of that same metaphor, but That simple reframing of the concept completely changed my life as a creator, because what was once more of an emotional comfort now felt like a tangible practical strategy. By approaching YouTube as a creator entrepreneur with a dot collector mindset, you can more clearly see how every video builds value, whether your channel takes off or not, even if a channel gets just a few hundred views per video, or picks up only a couple dozen subscribers, or only convinces one person to join your newsletter. As a creator here on YouTube, you're learning to write stories that hook attention while you develop your scripts and analyze retention. You're learning packaging and persuasion as you craft titles and thumbnails and descriptions. You're experimenting with positioning and how to call somebody to action when you're converting casual viewers into subscribers. And through all of that, you're building the evergreen skills that will give you leverage no matter what you create next, because you'll know how to command and hold attention, and how to build genuine trust with an audience, and how to shape an offer that resonates, and how to exchange real value. And from fine artists up to investors, these are the fundamental skills that will drive success, whether that's in 2 months or 2 decades. Which brings us now to that second reason, where most of us who decide to start our creator journey here on YouTube want to do everything in our power to ensure that our first video will be a huge success. But while I don't want to dissuade that level of effort, I'd argue that if you were to somehow pull that off, that very same early success might actually rob you of your most valuable future asset. I was recently listening to a podcast interview with Amjad, the founder of Replit, which is one of the hottest unicorns in Silicon Valley right now. And as he broke down his background and the decisions that brought him to where he is today, he reflected that whenever he had to make a choice, or that he was at a fork in the road, he would just ask himself, what would make the best story? And even the choices that led to temporary setbacks or failures, he still sees as the right call, and given the chance, he would make the same decisions despite knowing that they would lead to failure or a lot of pain at the time. And Donald Miller shares a similar philosophy in his book A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, where he talks about viewing life as a story that you're actively shaping, so that whenever you're faced with a fork in the road, as Amjad was, he urges you to choose the option that will make for a more meaningful narrative. Emotionally, I think that this is a beautiful lens to see life through, but as creators, the reason that this is valuable for us is that the most powerful stories aren't about people who got it right from the start. They're about people who got it wrong, and sometimes spectacularly wrong, but they kept going anyway. If you succeeded on day one, you'd have a moment to share, but if you failed for a year, you picked yourself up and finally broke through, you'd have a journey to share. And that journey becomes a map for others, and your struggles, while feeling like setbacks in the short term, become the most valuable parts of your story. Because nobody relates to perfection. They relate to the person who face-planted in front of their first audience, and who uploaded videos to single-digit views, and who wondered if they were fooling themselves, but they did it anyways. And those are the stories that give others permission to start their own journey, with all of the messiness that entails. And Robert McKee, who is one of the most respected experts on storytelling, captured this perfectly when he said, "What attracts us to story is the desire to experience that which we have not experienced. But what holds us in a story is the experience of that which is recognizably human. And the more difficult the experience, the greater the story." Joseph Campbell's framework for writing, referred to as the hero's journey, reinforces this idea in that the hero must face trials and failures. And it's these struggles that make the journey meaningful. But what's important to recognize here is that this isn't just true for books or movies, because as Donald Miller reminded us a few minutes ago, your life is a story that you're actively shaping. So when you do finally reach the success part of your story, those early failures will act as a multiplier for how much people will care that you made it there. You can see this with any successful creator or entrepreneur or celebrity who interviews well, because the most likable ones never hesitate to point back and to laugh with their audience about their early mistakes. But this isn't an accident or an act of humility on their part. They know the power that these early failures hold, and the most effective examples are when they can point to those early failures and you can go see it for yourself, because this proves that they're real and tangible and not just some fabricated story in order to appear relatable, which is something that those who reach success without much friction often do, because these early pitfalls hold an incredibly powerful psychological effect that is able to humanize them. Because the very best way to connect with people, whether they're your fans or your customers, is to be relatable. Relatability drives people to root for your success and to trust you to help them succeed. And if successful creators and celebrities find it so valuable that they often fabricate these failures, there's no reason to avoid genuinely making them yourself. And the truth is, if you don't have failures, you haven't taken enough swings yet. And if you don't have embarrassing stories of your failures, those swings simply weren't big enough. And if you're afraid of what people today will think of you, remember that your future fans will find gold in today's painful, relatable failures. Okay, so the third reason why starting your channel is valuable even if it fails comes down to how we think about identity and success in creative fields. Naval Ravikant has this great quote where he says, "We're still socially hardwired to not fail in public under our own names. On the other hand, the people who have the ability to fail in public under their own names actually gain a lot of power." I think when we say that we want to be a creator, what we're really saying is we want to be a successful creator. And that silent qualifier isn't inherently wrong. Of course we want to succeed, but it creates a paradox because we can't become successful at something we never start. I want you to look at this through two different lenses that reveal something fascinating about how we think. In gaming, for example, no one waits until you beat a game to call you a gamer. Dying in a game doesn't revoke your gamer card. It's literally part of the experience, and the identity comes from engaging in the activity, not from mastering it. Or let's take something more universal as an example with science in general. A scientist isn't less of a scientist when an experiment fails. That would fundamentally contradict the scientific method itself, because failure is built into the process of discovery. When an experiment fails, we don't question the scientist's identity. We recognize they're actively practicing science, because failure and iteration are what drive understanding forward. Creative work is no different. Just like scientists experiment and gamers play, creators create. But for some reason, we've turned titles like creator and artist and YouTuber into nouns, or achievements to unlock, or identities to earn, where in reality they're verbs. They're the work that we do and the practices that we engage in, or the skills that we develop through action. The moment that you pick up a camera and you upload content, you're a YouTuber and you're a creator. You're not wanting to become one or attempting and failing to be one. You're actively practicing as a creator. Think about for a second what being a YouTuber means in practice. You observe what works in your niche. You form a hypothesis about what might resonate with your audience, and you create a video to test that hypothesis. You study the results, and not just the views and engagements, but the comments and feedback and what made people click away, and you take all of that learning into your next video. And that's not just similar to the scientific method, it's exactly how innovation happens in any field, creation included. But we still get caught up in treating YouTuber like it's some final form or some achievement to unlock at a certain threshold of success. And I've seen this play out for 20 years in creative fields, where talented creatives wait for permission to refer to themselves as something in fear of being called out as not being a real designer or a real artist or whatever the title is, because they simply don't yet earn an income from that practice, or that they don't use specific tools or approach work in a certain way. And this is a result of very real gatekeeping and stigmas that stifle more potential than any lack of talent ever could. But this is not limited to just artists or designers. We see this manifest in any field rich with imposter syndrome. And YouTube is a perfect example of this, because those of us who have reached certain milestones, admittedly try to gatekeep that success to protect our identity because it feels fragile. And the way we do that is we define ourselves by metrics, the subscribers that we have, or the viewers that we achieve, or the income that we're receiving, rather than by the actual practice of just creating. Which ultimately brings us to the fundamental truth of this lesson, which is that success is not a prerequisite for identity. It's an outcome of consistent practice. As a creator, your task is to observe, to form hypotheses, to create content against those hypotheses, to study how an audience responds, to learn from those responses, and to move forward with that new knowledge. And that cycle of failing and learning and iteration is not just preparation for the job. It is the job, and the metrics are simply milestones along the way. 99% of would-be creators never start because they worry about that first viewer who might see their work fail, and they fear that if someone discovers their early attempts, that the viewer won't subscribe and the opportunity will be lost forever. But this completely inverts the process. It's by failing now that you initiate the cycle that leads to that better work, and when those future videos pick up traction, if that same person comes across your new video and somehow remembers your early attempts, the only question that they're going to be asking themselves is how they could have been so wrong the first time around about the value that you have to offer. But the truth is that while those first videos may not have actually been valuable to them, they were incredibly valuable to you because you were in your era of collecting your dots, of developing a story that others would relate to when you find your success, and you were taking your first real steps of establishing the practice of what it actually means to be a creator. You were capitalizing on the failure rather than remaining at the starting line trying to avoid it. And if you found this video helpful, I'd love to hear from you in the comments, and if you'd like more videos like this, both my most popular and my most recommended video should be popping up here on the screen in a second. So check those out, and until next time, I appreciate you being here, and I'll catch you in the next one.